Welcome to Vin and Mike, episode 108. 108, Mike.
We keep climbing. We keep climbing. What's up, Vinny?
Summer's coming in. It's like 110 today. No, not really, but it feels like it. How was your long weekend?
Long weekend was great. You know, weather made all the difference. Played a lot of cornhole outside.
Cornhole, huh?
Yeah, that's my new game.
Okay.
The gentleman blew us with
from
part of it.
Pickleball to cornhole.
I like cornhole. Something about it. It's fun.
Yeah, it's always a good time. Let me get through our quick thing here, then you can introduce our guests. Hello, KKFI, Kansas City.
What's up, KC?
Our website, vinandmikepodcast.com. Go to the store there, buy a shirt, buy a magnet, buy a sticker, buy something. All proceeds, of course, go to charity. So go ahead, Mike, introduce our special guest.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one because we've been talking about this for a while. I know he is too. So he wears that Mets jersey so boldly. It's hard to wear it these days, but he is an avid Mets fan. He's been to the World Series. He's going to talk about that. He has the game on in the background. Can't wait to hear these stories. He's a good friend. He's my neighbor, and I love just hearing everything about the Mets. Mr. David Schwartz, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to join you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Dave. Dave, I got a quick question before we start. How many times have you called the cops on Mike for a loud noise?
Only twice.
Only twice.
Only twice. All right, baby.
All right. I just want to make sure, you know.
Any more information?
I just got to know. I don't know what goes on in that Mike world over there, you know. Everyone always wants to know how often you ride your Peloton bike. I said, I don't know. The dust is building up on top of his head.
Dust is building. I'm outdoors these days.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
I think I'm more guilty than Mike. He hears expletives all the time, which coincide with the games on the back of my TV.
Yeah, he started like Frank the Tank.
Yeah, that Mets bullpen is just not something that's been too friendly to you this year. So we'll get into all that. We're going to listen to Dave, get to some really great Mets stories and all that. But, Mike, I know we want to start talking tribute a little bit to Bill Walton. For those that don't know, Bill Walton, the NBA center, the NCAA, UCLA greatest maybe player of all time, center, passed away at the age of 71. Mike, you start off.
Yeah, for me, I recently just watched his documentary again, The Luckiest Guy Alive, and I mean his college career was like no other. And honestly, if he didn't have those injuries in the NBA, he would have been way up there. I think the coolest thing about Bill Walton, after his NBA career, he went into commentary, and he just let it all loose, you know, and it permeates with the music that he loved. He loved the Grateful Dead, and he wasn't afraid to show that. He always was himself, was a very lovable guy on TV, off TV. You hear stories about him. You see all these messages coming in about him. But what I love, to me, when he talks how much pride he had going to the Celtics later in his career in the 85-86 season, joining Parrish and Bird and McHale and that dream team, and he won the sixth man there, and just being so happy to be a part of that when he had injuries in the Celtics and Auerbach took a chance on him and he was able to win the championship with them. You see, he talks about it with so much pride, and I was shocked by it. I had no idea he was sick. He was a staple for the NBA. When you said the name Bill Walton, I think it was synonymous with just, you smiled because some of the things he came up with was so ridiculous and what he talked about, but he always had a good attitude. And I know that Frank Caliendo, the impressionist, he did a great one of Bill Walton, and he was always easy to imitate. But I see you even, Vinny, you're smiling just talking about it, like hearing about it. That's who Bill Walton was. That's what he brought to the NBA. And his collegiate career as well. I mean, he had a career.
He just, for me, like 86 Celtics, right? 85, 86 Celtics was like the first team as like a teenager that I really couldn't stand, right? And he was just one of those guys as that sixth man with Parrish, McHale, and Bird. He was just like part of that little rotation they had, just, mainly backing up Parrish, but essentially they ran like a four man like set there, and he would play about 20 minutes a game, something like that. But he just seemed like every time he was on the court, the team would just like have that spark and just do like phenomenal things. And then, of course, watching the UCLA teams that he played for in the early 70s, that I think they won 88 games in a row when he was there. And he was the college player of the year. Every year he was there. Just phenomenal talent coming out of UCLA. Went to Portland, won a championship in Portland, won an MVP in Portland. Then I was listening last night, which I didn't know, he had a whole big grievance with Portland and how they dealt with his contract, and he sat out a whole year. He just sat out because he didn't like the way they were dealing with him, and then traded him to the Clippers. Then he had all those crazy injuries his whole time with the Clippers, and then finally got his body right for essentially I think the last year he was with the Clippers, and then that 85-86 team, which I looked up today, and he played 80 games. So it was like a career high in games played, like the whole thing. And then the following year, he only played a few games and basically stepped away. His knees never were right, all that. But like I said, I couldn't stand that 86 Celtic team. They beat us every time. They beat everybody. I think they only lost one home game that whole season. Easily went on to win a championship. But to me, he was always like the focal point. As great as Bird and all those guys were around him, there's something about him being there. And just recently, I think it was this year, I was listening to him be a color commentator on one of the tournament games. I'm pretty sure he was covering, or he was covering one of the games. And like you said, Mike, I didn't know he was sick at all. I know he had the back problems and the knee, like all that stuff. I knew that was something, but I didn't realize he had cancer and got that sick. But just a phenomenal personality for the game of basketball. And like you said, if those injuries didn't catch up with him, he would have been even a bigger legacy than he was. I mean, I don't know if you could get any bigger than the personality he was, right? I mean, it was unbelievable. Dave, I know you probably listened to watch him a little bit. Any thoughts on Bill?
Oh, I just remember him being a unique individual. I actually remember back when I was a young boy watching the UCLA victories and then watching him transition to the NBA. Just a great player and, again, a unique force of nature within the sport. I think it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said he was the best among us yesterday, and I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah. I always think of Kareem and Walton, right? Like the UCLA connection. I think there was someone in between them for like a year or something, but essentially, like, those great wooden teams were built around Kareem and Walton for sure. I just hope his family's doing well, and my condolences to his family and his friends and his teammates. Danny Ainge talked about him last night, and Scott Van Pelt said he had him on, and all he talked about was a bear. He didn't even really talk about sports. So, a typical like Bill Walton thing. So I don't know if you have any last words, Mike.
No, just like I said, the personality was just amazing. And I know he had a big family too. I think he has like 5 or 6 kids. And obviously one of them, coached, a bunch of them played, but he loved playing basketball with his sons. He loved teaching them about music. And someone, I think Rich Eisen said, or Dan Patrick said, he was trying to get the over-under of how many times his sons went to a Grateful Dead concert with him, and it was lower than he thought. But when he came to Boston, Kevin McHale would always laugh because that's all he talked about was the Grateful Dead. He's like, "Oh, you got to come to a concert," and they all thought he was crazy, but they all laughed about He was very lovable. Lovable.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of good stories I listened to yesterday. If people haven't got to see the documentary, they should check it out or listen to anything about him. A lot of good stuff. So, talking about basketball and Boston, they had, I think, a very unique sweep. Right? I didn't think that any of maybe game 2, but the other
should have won.
Were really close. It wasn't like your typical like Boston's that much better than Indiana and went in and dominated. I thought Indiana could have won all 3 of those other games. So real interesting, but I think Boston's got to be the heavy favorite, whoever comes out of the West, which most likely it'll be Dallas. I think Porzingis will be back. I was really impressed with the series Jaylen Brown had. Tatum was a little off, and he has those kind of series once in a while. As great as he is, he's, gets a little wishy-washy out there. But I thought Jaylen Brown was great. Drew Holiday playing great defense. But I was pretty impressed with Indiana. I thought they were going to get wiped out. I mean, they essentially got swept, but I thought they were much more competitive than I expected, because I thought they played an injured Milwaukee team, an injured Knicks team, and then I thought they were just going to walk into this behemoth and just show they weren't supposed to be there. But at the end of the day, I think they were supposed to be there, and they got a lot of upside.
They should hold their hats up high. I mean, you're right. This should have been a more even series. I mean, those games were lost in the last 5 minutes. But you know what that comes to? A playoff experience.
Yeah.
Coaching. That's why the Celtics got there, right? Indiana is a young team. They did everything they could, but that all came in the last 5 minutes. So,
yeah. And Halliburton being hurt in game 2 and missing game 3 and 4 was a big hit, of course, also. I think, talking about it, the Mavericks are the first team to be losing all 3 games with less than 5 minutes to go and winning in the playoffs.
That's an impressive stat.
Like I don't know what the Timberwolves are doing. Charles Barkley said he thinks they're playing too big down the stretch. Like they shouldn't be playing Gobert and Towns down the stretch. But at the same time, you have the lead with 5 minutes to go in all 3 games. I don't know what you change up, especially that's been your team all year.
100%.
So I don't know. Dave, any thoughts on the playoffs?
No, just sort of a reminder of the past to see the Celtics once again in the finals. That was something that I experienced a lot in my past. So Mike and I are mourning right now, of course, that our beloved Knicks are not there, and that's, I guess, my biggest regret at this point.
One thing about Dave, though, he followed the Knicks back in the glory days, but now he's a re-energized Knicks fan, and I'm happy to hear that.
He followed the Knicks during the Rory Sparrow days, is what you're saying, Mike.
He bypassed the Rory Sparrow days.
We're talking Clyde and Willis Reed.
Oh, those guys.
Those guys. But I must say, Mike got me back on the bandwagon, and I must confess I'm on the bandwagon.
I love
it. It was I really appreciated him re-energizing my excitement of the Knicks basketball team.
Yeah, and I think Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart and DiVincenzo really excite you when you watch them play too. So it's just gives you a lot of good energy and a good feel, hopefully, going into next year. I know Brunson already had surgery on his hand, which is good to hear. Let's get it out of the way, get it healed up. Because the season comes back real quick. Like September is like right around the corner.
Be ready.
Talking about September, we are 100 days away from Thursday Night Football opening up. So we're right there. It's coming, Mike. It's coming. Yeah, here we go.
We'll have time to talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's get to the Mets.
Let's look at some Dave stories. What do you want to hear, Mike? You ask him the first
Dave, first of all, thank you again for being on. And, I think our audience is really interested about how you became a Mets fan. And obviously this team is beloved to you. I mean, you've gone to so many games and just hearing some of your best stories. I know you've been to the World Series. And just the kind of background to give our audience as far as how you got into the Mets.
Oh, my pleasure. So I'm raised on Long Island, which is almost a birthright back in the day if you were a sports fan. And my first Met game was in 1966. It was a 6-0 win over the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I can still remember, even though I was a Mets fan, rooting for Roberto Clemente. And I've been very fortunate to have attended almost every World Series game played by the Mets at either Citi Field or Shea Stadium. I would go there as a little boy, take a bus up Union Turnpike in Queens, transfer at Roosevelt Avenue, and spent much of my childhood with my best friends going to Met games. And those were just great years. But, you know, if you're a Met fan, you have to have sort of a defeatist attitude. I've always felt that every child in the United States should be brought up as a Met fan, because there's no greater lesson in overcoming adversity than being a Mets fan. And, you know, watching those seasons where Tom Seaver would win 1-0 games or lose 2-1 games, you know, we always had the issue with our offense, much like we're having this year. Even though right now the Mets are winning 2-0 over the Dodgers, I can assure you in Met fashion that'll be the last lead the Mets have over the Dodgers in today's doubleheader. What we win as of this moment. What memories can I tell you about? I remember being at Tom Seaver's consecutive strikeout game for most 200 strikeout seasons in a row. I think one of my great memories was in 1986. However, I was at Game 6. A lot of people say there were Game 6 in 86 of the World Series where Mookie Wilson hit the ball between Buckner's legs. And the Mets went on to win that game. But I was actually there, and my memory of that game was I was sitting next to this guy, must have been about 250 pounds, big burly guy. The whole game, he's like scaring me and my friends, intimidating us. He's just an angry Mets fan. But in that inning, when Mookie Wilson hit the ball underneath Buckner's legs and the Mets went on to win that miraculous game, the guy turns to me, tears streaming from his eyes, and he gives me this enormous bear hug, crying in relief that the Mets had come back to win that game. So that's one of my great memories. But another memory. If you remember the left-handed reliever Jesse Orozco, when the Mets won the Houston series in '86, which was a great playoff series, I went to LaGuardia Airport at 2 a.m. to welcome the Mets home from Houston.
Wow.
My best friend and I were bleary-eyed, exhausted. The bus arrives at Shea Stadium from LaGuardia Airport, and Jesse Orozco gets off the bus, and we're like, Jesse, we love you. Great save. And he turns to me and goes, my name's Jerry. One of the warm and fond memories of the New York Metropolitans. But
how would you compare the '69 Mets to the '86 Mets as far as the lineup and the players and what you saw? How would you compare those teams?
Well, I'd also say their relative proclivity for cocaine ingestion was the differentiator. But let's say the '86 Mets were truly a miraculous club. They had a bunch of overachieving journeymen like Ed Kranepool and Ron Swoboda. Of course, what made that year different is getting Don Clendenin. But the '86 Mets were truly a more talented ball club. I mean, you're talking Gary Carter, Keith Hernandez, Ray Knight, Darryl Strawberry, a pitching staff that was second to none. What was unfortunate about '86 is that, because of some side issues, like I mentioned earlier, they didn't go on to win another World Series, and they really should have. But I would say the '86 team was probably superior to the '69 team, although the '69 team was truly miraculous in a lot of ways.
That game 6, the first 2 outs, right? Backman and Hernandez get out. How many people actually left, like at that point, or was everyone still staying around?
Everybody stayed. I think we were more shell shocked than anything else. It was even hard to get up out of your seats. Here you are watching this spectacular ball club throughout all of the year. 107 victories, was it? I could be wrong. Right around there. And you were just in disbelief that they were going to lose, and you were certain that they were going to lose. But we know the rest. We know what happened after that, and it was history.
Yeah, it's you know, when I rewatch it, I'm always more amazed. Not that they came back, is that they had 2 outs and nobody on in that inning, and it was the extra innings too, which was even more incredible. And just, you know, single after single after single, and then they tie it, and then, you know, Mookie Wilson with the you know, the great Vin Scully call. You know, it's like, it's probably, you know, one of the top 5 baseball calls of all time. And it just, you know, the greatness of Vin Scully calling it makes it just like so much better.
Absolutely. Even though I missed Bob Murphy calling that game. Bob Murphy is the legendary radio announcer of the New York Mets, sort of Howie Rose's predecessor. Another memory from that game that a lot of people don't recall was the appearance of Fan Man. There was this guy who parachuted out in the 7th inning with a parachute and a propeller tied to his back and stopped the game. And people don't remember that because it was overshadowed by, of course, what occurred. But that was a bizarre occurrence. I still have my ticket stub to that game.
Wow.
And the face value on that ticket was $30.
How much?
$30.
$30. That'd be a $300 ticket today.
It would. It would be easily 300 now.
Easily,
probably more.
Easily.
Right, World Series, yeah.
Which brings another memory, if I may. So I went to the first game of the 2015 World Series in Kansas City, and I had a business trip in Kansas City and showed up at the airport and was summarily interviewed by the TV network, the main ABC affiliate for Kansas City. And I was able to give a sort of a description as to why Met fans were going to KC, because it was easier to fly to Kansas City, buy a ticket in Kansas City, than to go to Citi Field and watch the game from a cost perspective. It was like half the cost. And it was a hilarious interview. They were like, yeah, this guy's from New York, and here are the prices in New York right now. And he's right. You can get a ticket in Kansas City and fly there for cheaper. And that's always a memory of mine, of being interviewed that day on Kansas City News.
Our KKFI audience will appreciate that story. You know, knowing that the Royals actually, you know, won the World Series that year. So they're probably happy just listening to that.
Absolutely. They remember that first game when the first batter for KC hit a ball that stuck under the wall in center field. And our center fielder just let the ball sit there, and it was an inside the park home run, which was Cespedes, a man of great stature and I don't know, how should I put it? He didn't always give 100%, but he was a great hitter, and that was a bad omen for the rest of that series.
He had fantastic spring training cars. That's what he had.
He did.
You know, Dave, I know aside from the Mets, you're just a huge baseball fan in general. I mean, you live for it. What do you think of the recent changes with the pitch count, you know, speeding up the game? How do you feel about that?
I think that, you know, and I'll preface all of that by saying baseball is not a matter of life or death. It's much more important than that. So I think that the pitch count, I think the games were just getting too long. I mean, imagine a 14-year-old kid trying to watch a ball game with his dad, a game that starts at 7 or 8 o'clock and the game going to 11. You know, it was going to be something that was causing the end of viewership. It was just the games were going too long. And so even though as a purist, it's a little weird to watch a pitcher follow a pitch clock, to watch a game that's 2.5 hours, I think is much more palpable than games that were, you know, 3.5, 4 hours long. I mean, myself personally, you watch the pregame show for a half hour, you watch the game, and you watch the postgame show. That's a 5-hour commitment every night, which is a little narcissistic. So when you can bring that game down to 2.5 hours, I think it's a positive for the sport. The extra inning rules are kind of weird. I'm not sure what you guys think of that. I'd love to get your opinion on that, but starting off every extra inning with a guy on second base is kind of odd. But again, it speeds the game up.
I think that's all. I think you answered it. It's all speed. They want to speed things up. So
at first I was like, why are we, changing the game, right? But then I look at the other, major sports, and they all change the game, right? They shorten the quarters. They do different possessions in football. I think in hockey they go to like 4-on-4s if they have to. Basketball goes to like those 5-minute quarters. So as much as you like to see them stay with the full innings, I get where their thought process is, and like Mike says, it's just to get the game over with, and the younger audience now wants to watch things for 2.5-3 hours the most and get out of there, right? The number one sport, as we know, is football, and a 3-hour game is what you get, and then it's over. And I think that's where the thought process is. Like anything more than 3 hours is insane, to the newer audience, to the younger audience. So, baseball just had to figure out a way to get to that like 3-hour time limit. You still get some games that'll go 3.5 hours. The worst is when it's on the West Coast, and like you said, sure. You watch the game, and then for some reason you're up at 1:00 in the morning. And you decide to watch the post game show for another 30 minutes. Meanwhile, you have to be up in 3 hours, right? But I guess that's part of being a baseball fan. Just thinking outside of the Mets, like for myself, outside of like the Yankees, when I was growing up, one of the guys that I loved watching, and still I consider him probably one of my heroes, because when I was younger I played third base, was Mike Schmidt, and I loved the right-handed slugging kind of third baseman, and I played third base in Little League and was a right-handed hitter and wanted to hit home runs like that. Anybody like that for you, Dave, outside of the Mets that you grew up watching? I think you said Clemente.
Sure. Willie Stargell was a great ball player to watch, very dynamic. Greg Luzinski from the Phillies.
Yep.
And I'm going back, of course. I was fortunate to see Bob Gibson pitch. And with the exception of Tom Seaver, there was nothing like seeing Bob Gibson pitch. Then I was fortunate to see Mantle in his last days, so kind of missed his heyday. I was a little too young for that. And then as far as Met players that came from the past, Cleon Jones, Tommy Agee. I was a big fan of Dave Kingman, who many may not know, but he was about a 7-foot-tall, honorary home run hitter with a lifetime .231 batting average, but it hit 700-foot home runs. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it seemed like that.
Yeah, I remember Dave Kingman. I thought every time he hit a home run, it was like 700 feet off.
Exactly. It just seemed that way.
Oh, man, some good stuff. So Tom Seaver, was that the most disappointing thing for you as a Met fan when they traded him?
For Jim Fregosi or whatever that trade was? It was, he was getting towards the end of his career. It was heart-shattering. It was very distressing. Although I would say that in terms of, because he already achieved so much with the Mets, when you think of lost opportunity, trading Nolan Ryan as a youngster got me more than anything else, because we lost all of that potential. At least Seaver got us the series. But trading a young Nolan Ryan probably was, of all of the dumb moves made by the Mets historically, probably the dumbest.
I just read an amazing stat today, actually, on Nolan Ryan. Mm-hmm. So he has 198 quality starts where he did not win a game, and he's 0-107 in those quality starts, but he had like a 2.20 ERA. So 107 of his losses, which he had over 200 plus, were games where if he had any real kind of offense when he pitched, could have been different. He could have closer to 350, 400 wins than where he actually ended up. So I thought that was an unbelievable stat that I read. He has the most losses in the history of baseball for a guy with a quality start.
Yeah, I would say that's pitcher victories is probably something that is disproportionately skewed against a pitcher's true performance because it's so much dependent upon the offense of a team. And you look at Seaver as well. I mean, how many games could Seaver have won if he was on a team that had a more potent offense than the Mets had in the early 70s? Same with Ryan, of course.
Yeah, you're right. I think I always try to think of where a guy that was on your team and then he got traded away or free agency and then excelled somewhere else. I mean, Nolan Ryan has to be like number one for maybe all of sports when you really think about it. I don't know. I mean, I try to think of other guys, but I don't. Probably Mike has a Jet in his mind or a Nick. I don't know.
I want to keep the conversation. We can get that later. But Dave, I know one of your favorite Mets players was Keith Hernandez, now in the broadcasting booth. What do he mean to you as a Met? Why is he number one on that list?
Well, Keith was and is unique. I think even though he won, I could say even though he won 9 Gold Gloves, his defense is still underrated. If you watch a game back in the day when he played for the Mets, he not only was just an incredible defender, he really ran the infield. He truly was the captain. And of course, I liked his personality. He was always sort of the Keith Hernandez camp versus the Gary Carter camp. So the bad guy versus the good guy. You remember what happened when Keith went into you mentioned this earlier, Vin, when he made the second out and goes into the dugout. What does Keith do? Goes into the clubhouse.
Cigarette, right?
Smoking a cigarette.
Drinking a beer.
And he was on deck after Mookie Wilson, which would have been very interesting if Mookie hadn't won the game. So, but no, I just have a great love of Keith Hernandez as a player, clutch hitter, great situational hitter. The guy would just slap a ball. So much of that is lacking from today's hitting prowess he exhibited when it came to how you win a game and how you advance runners. So much of that missing from the game today. And then he's become a fixture in the Mets broadcasting booth and has really become, even though he had a St. Louis tenure, he's become a true Met. His number's been retired, as Dwight Gooden's was this year, and as will Darryl Strawberry's next month.
Yeah. Let's talk about the current Mets. Obviously a slow start this year. Up against the Dodgers right now. We'll hope they get that win. Score hasn't changed, but what are you seeing so far this year? And there's been a lot of talks. What Steve Cohen has done, and if they're going in the right direction, pitching, the hit. I mean, what are your initial thoughts this season? And what's going wrong? And what are some things that may be going right that people have to have more patience for?
Well, I would say that with the trade of Verlander and Scherzer last year, Steve Cohen, even though he sacrificed $80 million in the process, did a lot to stock up the farm system, which is what the Mets have been lacking for some time. So this year was intended, even though they wouldn't admit to it, as being a transitional year. Clearly, when you look at the product right now, 8 games under 500, an offense that is ranking close to last in Major League Baseball, and a rotation made up of solid journeymen. If we achieved a wild card win, we'd be lucky. And then you have a guy who won the batting title, who's hitting 200, 220. You've got Lindor, who's not playing up to expectation. Marte's playing all right. Alonso's not clutch this year. So just a lot of things working against them from an offensive perspective. And the bullpen, which was strong initially, is now, as you would anticipate, overtaxed because they're constantly facing adversity. And so you're just overtaxing your bullpen. And now you're seeing a bullpen that is a third of the way through the season, looking like it's 2/3 of the way through the season, beat up and tired. So I would say that it's a frustrating year for Met fans. There's a great site, if any of you are out there in the audience are familiar with it, called the Mets Have Agita, where self-deprecating Met fans get together and curse out the Mets on a daily basis. But I think the frustrations that are aired on that site are indicative of the frustrations we have for the team right now. Like I said, they're winning 2-0 right now, and we'll see what happens. We got a nice doubleheader today, but I'm not expecting too much out of this team. Although I will say that Steve Cohen's from my hometown of Great Neck, New York, and the guy's got more money than the next 3 owners in baseball combined. But that brings up the age-old, issue: can money buy you a winning team? And as of yet, it has not done so for the Mets.
Do you think they're going to be sellers if they stay this course come July 30th?
I'm not sure they have that much to sell. Again, Jeff McNeil, you got Alonso in his walk year, but Alonso is the heart of the franchise. I think the Mets are compelled to re-sign him. But I think that they could very well be, if this keeps up. I think the next 3 or 4 weeks, of course, are going to be very important. Right now, the return for Senga is up in the air. So who the hell knows what's going to happen with him as the ace of the bullpen, of the staff, rather. It's a frustrating year, gentlemen, to say the least, as a Mets fan, especially with the evil empire across the town doing so well, as I like to refer to them. Met fans have the greatest inferiority complex in Major League Sports because we always have the Yankees across town. So this year is pretty indicative of that juxtaposition.
Yeah, it would feel better if the Yankees actually won something in the last 15 years, but that's a whole other story.
Like I said, the same for the Mets.
Yeah, we have a different Steinbrenner running the ship, and it doesn't feel like the old days.
What I'd love to see is for the Mets to pay Soto $650 million and bring him over next year. But I think Soto's demonstrated that money is not everything to him, which is why he didn't remain on the Nats. And he might, unfortunately, have an infectious desire to stay on the Yankees, on a team that at least wins more than the Mets do.
Yeah, as long as him and Aaron Judge keep getting along, I think that might, be a little advantage in our favor to, give him 45, 50 million a year instead of 60 million.
Exactly.
Mike, anything else for Dave?
No, I think I want to talk old school Mets. I want to talk about new Mets. I know he's been to some games this year, so he goes to the games. He's enjoying it. Vinny, you made me laugh because you're like, the Yankees haven't won anything in 15 years. I go, well, I hope that the Knicks could win something in 50 years, and the Jets too. So I don't feel so bad.
I don't know. We're in a little drought here in sports fandom. Maybe the Rangers could win a Stanley Cup and make us feel
That
better.
would be nice for the city.
That would be nice for the city. They always have that soccer team coming in Queens in a couple of years, so you never know.
Something to make us feel good.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike. Anything else? What did we cover?
Just Dave, huge appreciation for coming on the show. Wanted this to happen for a while. I'm sure our audience, when they listen, they're going to love hearing about your stories. Anyone who's gotten a chance to experience World Series, memories of a lifetime that you get to share, and we truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be on the Vin and Mike show, and congratulations on 108 episodes. That is quite a landmark.
We appreciate it, very much.
Congratulations.
And we hope you do at least 108 more.
I'll just leave you with this theme song.
Here we
Please.
go. Come and greet the Mets. Bring your family.
Hey, I can see you doing that song.
Karaoke.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Goodbye.
Thanks,
See you next
man.
time. See you next week.
All right, audience. We'll talk to you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.